But before we do that, what we're going to do is have a very, very quick recap of the first two Samgrahavastus. And then I'll focus on Artacharya. Then we'll have a bit of a conversation in 2 or 3 groups. We'll come back and we'll talk about what it takes to work out what beneficial activity really is. Okay, so I hope you still want to stay. And this is the talk you want to be at, yes? And then there'll be another opportunity to have to talk about this in 2 or 3 smaller groups. So 2 weeks ago, we heard that the Samgrahavastus are the means of unifying a Sangha, of building and maintaining a happy, healthy community of practitioners who are all on the same path, heading for the same goal. We also heard that these 4 Samgrahavastus are dana, or generosity, priyavadita, or kindly speech, artacharya, or beneficial activity, and fourthly, samanarthata, or exemplification. We also heard that both generosity and kindly speech are based on metta. Both are an expression of our affection for or appreciation of someone, or perhaps even our gratitude towards someone. So metta is quite an important thing here, isn't it, in creating our happy, healthy Sangha. Something that's been occurring to me this week is that the 4 Samgrahavastus are actually the ways in which we do Sangha. Because Sangha isn't something we get or that we have some sort of entitlement to, as it were. It's not a thing. It's not a noun, actually. I've decided that Sangha, or more correctly, Sangaring, is a verb. It's something we do. It doesn't exist in abstract over there. And in fact, we make and we co-create Sangha together for one another with each other's best interests at heart. Some of you, I think maybe all of you, were on the Sangha weekend, the retreat that we had, and Diane Andy gave a very beautiful talk, which she introduced telling us all about how the trees in a forest look after one another, that the trees work together in order to maintain the health of the whole forest. They share their nutrients. They tell each other when there's a disease, and they help each other with their immune responses to that. And it's the same in the Sangha. We co-create it so we can grow, and so each other can grow, so that we can grow. Yeah. And last week we talked about priyavadita. And so if you've been trying something out around kindly, truthful speech this last week, maybe you've been doing a bit more rejoicing, would you mind popping something in the chat box so that we can all find out about what you've been up to and how it's gone? Okay, so let's focus on Artacharya now. So Artacharya means beneficial activity. Arta means the means, the end goal for the benefit of living beings. And charya means the activity or way of. So Artacharya can be translated as activity that brings benefit to beings. Activity that brings benefit to beings. So it's not just about doing good. I don't know what your emotional response is to that sentence, doing good. Yeah. It's not just doing good, it's also very attractive. When we see others doing things and acting in ways that truly benefit others, it's very attractive. We're drawn to it. We want to join in. We want to participate, to give back, or to contribute ourselves. So according to Subhuti, I think most of you will have heard of Subhuti. Subhuti is a very experienced order member who's a great public speaker and is an amazing studier and presenter of the Dharma. He says that Artacharya has two parts. The first part is seeing suffering and doing what we can to eliminate it. So we see the suffering and we do what we can to eliminate it. But the second part, and I found this really interesting, he says that Artacharya also is about bringing a sense of fulfillment and deepening satisfaction into our lives. So we involve ourselves in activities that make a difference, that help to reduce suffering. And that then helps us to feel more deeply satisfied with our lives, because it brings about greater levels of contentment, joy and happiness in all those involved. So it helps us to feel more involved and more content, but it helps others, and we see that. So it's one of those positive cycles. So yes, Artacharya isn't just about doing good. So how do we respond to the suffering in others? That's the first question here. So my experience, and reading also about this from Subhuti, is that we can respond to suffering, if we're not careful, with two extremes of response, particularly if we're not in the best of mental states. So the first thing, and it'd be interesting to see which you recognise, if you recognise these in yourself. Hello, Arya Drishti. So the first way in which we might respond to suffering is we do good in a sort of patronising, superior sort of way. And this is a bit like doing good very, very self-consciously, perhaps with a sense of other people not being capable of helping themselves, or a sense of it's good for them. We might, this is where I have had this experience, from my experience of being a health professional. So I was a dietitian for a long time and a health service manager. And I was trained to be an expert in something, as in nutrition, to do with and to help people with their health. So I knew stuff, I was an expert, and my patients didn't always know stuff. And somehow, I think that sometimes I definitely had a sense of I'm the expert and they know nothing. And I was only, in my 20s when I knew nothing. And most of my patients were in their 50s or 60s. I cringe now at how I might have talked to them. And I don't know if anybody else has ever had a similar experience. Can anybody want to wave their hand if they've ever felt, when they look back in their past, have they ever done that? Being a bit patronising in their knowing, that you know something and other people might not. Yeah. So I wonder if experts can do that as part of the dynamic that gets set up, perhaps, when you know more than other people. But I wonder also if this sort of approach is a way of keeping suffering at bay or over there. It's a way of blocking suffering out, maybe, of thinking, if not consciously, of it won't happen to me. Yeah. So I can remember in my 20s looking at 50-year-old people and 60-year-old people, many of whom were a bit of overweight and had diabetes, and that's why they were being sent to this 20-year-old dietitian who was 7.5 stone, you know, and probably ate the most perfect diet ever. I'm sure I know that I found myself thinking, oh my goodness, how have you managed to get yourself looking like that? It's horrid. But who, you know, I wonder if anyone else has been there in the past. Maybe you haven't. So I think it's easy to get into a blocking out of suffering by doing good, keeping suffering over there, not empathizing, as it were. So at the other extreme, of course, there can be the tendency to over-identify with pain and suffering. To over-identify with the pain and suffering of others. To drown in it if we aren't careful. To be, if you like, a bit too empathic or a bit too sentimental. To get over upset or overwhelmed when we see suffering. And we call that in Buddhism horrified anxiety. So the state of horrified anxiety. It can sometimes mean, it usually means that we haven't quite got enough metta, haven't built up our reservoir of metta. So that's actually something that can really help when we get horrified anxiety. Has anybody experienced horrified anxiety during this pandemic at all? Watched the news, been on Facebook, thought, oh my goodness, I cannot bear it another moment. Yeah, we know it, don't we? So Artacharya is neither. It's neither blocking the suffering and doing good to keep it over there, and neither is it getting over-identified with the suffering of others to the extent that we can't help. Artacharya offers a middle way between these two extremes of blocking and drowning, whereby we respond, that we objectively see a need and an understanding what the need really is. We really see what the need is. And then secondly, we do our best to fulfill that need if we can. And this response, the action we take, arises out of awareness and metta. It arises out of a sense of fullness and richness internally, not out of a sense of I ought or I should, but because we want to respond, because we feel rich enough and whole enough inside to do so. But it's not easy. We don't always find a way to respond. So a couple of thoughts about what can get in the way. So certainly I can relate to this. First of all, one thing we can do is we can get wrapped up in ourselves and meeting our own needs. Now that doesn't mean we shouldn't meet our own needs, okay? What I'm saying is if we're wrapped up in worrying about ourselves, we aren't going to be able to notice what's going on around us. Another thing, of course, that gets in the way is that there is so much suffering. There is so much need here and everywhere. So in the UK, in the USA, in India, there's the pandemic, there's suffering. People are suffering and dying from the virus. They're suffering and dying because of the virus, not because they've got the virus, but because the virus is here, because they can't get access to treatment like cancer therapy or surgery that they need now. There's suffering for all the frontline workers, suffering for families cooped up in lockdown together, perhaps in a top floor flat without any garden or a park nearby. There's suffering due to poverty, inequality, homelessness, worry about losing jobs, etc. In the whole population, in those close to us and in those we don't know. There's so much suffering that sometimes we can't handle it, so we turn away. Has anybody had that experience of wanting to turn away? Yeah, we know it, don't we? It's a very human situation. And it's understandable. The pain is overwhelming. I feel like we can't blame people, including ourselves, for this, so we turn away. So in a little while, we're going to have a think about, so what can we do? Okay, it's not all despair. But for now, we're going to go into some breakout groups, aren't we? We're a little bit early, Sandeep. Is that okay?
That's fine, yes.
We're going to go into breakout groups for 15 minutes because we've got a bit longer, Sandeep. Is that okay?
Yes, again, that's fine.
So here's the question for you. And we'll put it in the chat box. What have other people done for you that has been of benefit to you in your spiritual / Buddhist life? What have other people done for you that has been of benefit to you in your spiritual / Buddhist life? And you could think quite broadly. Yeah, there might be practical things. I'm thinking of many car journeys with Shakijata. Great way of getting to know someone. So let's go into our breakout rooms. I'm happy to join one, Sandeep.
Great, yeah.
I'll come back in 15 minutes. If you could choose someone to keep an eye on the time, and if someone would be willing to take just a few key notes, and then we will get some feedback from one or two people, couple of groups, and I'll ask the rest of you to put any thoughts you've had in the chat box so that everybody can benefit from your reflections. Okay, are you on your own, Dayanandi, now?
I am.
Okay. So let's plunge back right in then. I was reminded by Dayanandi that Artacharya also means meaningful activity. Yeah. So what we mean by meaningful perhaps will become more clear as the rest of the talk carries on. So first of all, something I've been thinking about is in order to meet this huge need, and to respond to the suffering of the world without getting overwhelmed, we first of all need to make sure we've got the inner resources and the fuel to meet that suffering. So this is just to remind us all of how essential positive emotion is. Working on developing metta, joy, being clear and aware of what it is that nourishes us and keeps our reservoir of positive emotion topped up. So we all know that Buddhism is about compassion. It certainly is, but it's also equally about joy. Joy and compassion are like the wings of a bird flying through the sky, where the bird is metta, but the wings of the bird, one of them's joy and one of them's compassion. So if we only focus on compassion, what happens? If the wing gets broken, what happens? It falls out of the sky. Yeah. So the bird can't fly if its compassion wing is exhausted. And we hear, certainly in health and social care, one hears about compassion fatigue. and compassion overwhelm. And, you know, it's not easy to also remember that we need joy in order to help us do compassion. So what is it that brings us joy? What makes our hearts sing? So for me, during lockdown, and even more recently, while I've been supporting my son, who's been very poorly, having a mental health crisis, it's the joy of friends, the joy of having a dance with a friend. On Sunday evenings at 5:30, I've been having a disco with Amita Shuri on Zoom. I can't tell you what joy it brings me. I've been going for walks in nature, particularly with my friends, and having lovely conversations with friends like Robin. And I'm actually having one with Diane Andy next week too. And then some of us were on the Wabi Sabi retreat with Vajradarshini, which was a wonderful month-long exploration of the combination of art, natural beauty, and the Dharma. So my three of my favouriteest things, yeah. And then spending time, you know, with really, really close, lovely friends and partners. And the other thing that's given me a lot of joy is preparing and giving these talks. So a couple of times people have said to me, well, why are you doing that when there's so much struggle in your life at the moment? Actually, I've loved it. I've needed something meaningful, additionally meaningful and joyful, to give myself some joy, to keep going in order to be compassionate with my son. Oh, Shakijata, where have you gone? Is your signal gone? So having made sure we've got the resources, and, you know, if we get overwhelmed with horrified anxiety because of the suffering, perhaps it's a reminder that we've also need to look at how we get joy. And it's not so easy in lockdown, is it? But having a conversation with our friends, being really creative about it can help. Secondly, we have to realise that we simply cannot meet all the needs and all the demands of the whole world all at once. We cannot. So what we've got to do then is make priorities. We need to prioritise. Yeah? We need to prioritise. Shakijata, can you hear us? Let us know you can hear us. We need to have priorities. We need to ask ourselves, where do we want to place our energy? Where do I want to place my energy? Where are we as Buddhists best placed to help? What have we got uniquely to offer that other sources of help and support cannot offer? Well, it's a bit like, you know, in business, they say USP. What's our USP? Yeah. What are our particular, the unique selling points, although we're not selling it, yeah? We're giving it away. Given that there is so much suffering, the immediate suffering that we've already talked about related to COVID, but then there's also the other forms of suffering, aren't there, that are ongoing. So being with what we don't want. So being with lockdown, being with work friends we don't like being with, being with wet, cold weather. Some of us get a bit fed up of that, don't we? And then there's being separated from what we do want. So separated from our loved ones. Yeah, separated from our loved ones. Knowing that, and then there's the other form of suffering, which is knowing that everything we have and love will change and will eventually be lost, unless we're lost first. Yeah, but everything will go that is a form of suffering. So everything we get that's new will eventually become old. Yeah. So that new car, that new house, that new rose bush in the garden. But along with these forms of suffering, in Buddhism we talk about the deep, deep suffering of lack of fulfillment and lack of meaning in life. So here in the Western part of the world, and increasingly in countries that were not called the West, so in India and in China, where there is tremendous wealth and actually even very high levels of health, many people internally feel very poor because people don't know what their life is about anymore. People have a lack of meaning. And what I've noticed is that often when I talk to people, say through my work, is that people don't know where to find that fulfillment and meaning either. And certainly it was a lack of meaning that brought me to the Dharma. So I didn't know at the time, but because I was very depressed, I didn't get it. There didn't seem any point to me because I saw very clearly in my teens that we were all going to die and we were all going to get ill and we were all going to suffer and that there wasn't any point. And then I trained in science, so that confirms that scientific perspective. So I was lacking meaning in my life. So whenever there was anything that was challenging, like having a baby is pretty challenging. So I had a baby and then I got very depressed because I could also see that he would suffer and get ill and die too. And here he is at the moment suffering greatly. And that's what brought me to the Dharma. So as Buddhists, what we uniquely offer is the Dharma. No one else can offer that. We offer the Dharma. So if we look at that in a particular way, what we can offer is tools and skills to calm the mind, to bring about greater levels of contentment and happiness. We can also offer teachings and perspectives that help people to make sense of suffering and help us to be better equipped to deal with and respond creatively to suffering. And what we can offer is we can offer anyone who wants to come and try it out the opportunity to find greater fulfillment and more deeply meaningful lives. So this is what I want to focus my life on. This is the priority for me. And this is really ultimately what Atacharya is. So because we have a deep conviction and confidence that the Dharma is the answer to the overwhelming needs of the world, Atacharya is that beneficial activity that helps people to grow and develop, to find peace, contentment, joy, freedom, and meaning in their lives. It's sharing the Dharma through teaching and supporting others to learn and practice. But we can't all just start teaching the Dharma, So it's equally all those activities that make sharing the Dharma possible, like tech support, Sandeep, advertising classes, participating, I'm sorry, I've just lost my place. Advertising classes, cleaning the Buddhist centre, bringing biscuits and tea bags, putting flowers on the shrine, doing the washing up and being on reception. It's also participating in classes or giving a friend a lift to a class or helping a friend to understand a bit of the Dharma that they haven't quite got their head round, or they're interpreting in a particular way that perhaps isn't helping them. So we can, and we all do, contribute to making the Dharma available to more and more people, indirectly or directly. So on our weekend retreat that we just had at the weekend, which was also on the theme of the Samgravasthus, can't say it again, Samgrahavastus, it's such a hard word. On the weekend retreat, Aparajita gave a really great talk on Artacharya and Samanarthata. He encouraged us all to keep the flame of the Dharma alive for each other, but also for future generations. And he encouraged us to do that by being confident in ourselves and in what we can offer. Yeah. And he really emphasized the need for us to be confident, which I'll come back to in a minute. So we can all share our strengths, yeah. And my personal experience is that if we share from our strengths rather than the things we think we ought to be good at, or the things that are naturally not our strengths, there's no point. Share from our strengths. So that strength might be that we're friendly. It might be that we're really good at thinking and planning. It might be that we're really good at techie stuff. We might not be very good at techie stuff, but we might be really, really keen to learn. So we do learn it. So then we can host events on Zoom. We might have strengths in finance or budgeting, or poetry, or puja leading, or cake making, or signpost making, or shrine making, or teaching and sharing the Dharma. Or we might love and have a real ability to take a Sangha friend for a walk in nature and point out some birds or point out some trees. Or we might be really good at fundraising. It can be sometimes really hard work to build and deepen that self-confidence. My own experience, and I know this really, yeah, from my own experience and my own life. Somehow, like many people, I absorbed a view that I wasn't enough, yeah. I've spent many, many years trying to believe I'm enough and I've got things to offer, yeah. And you just have to keep working at it and turning around views in our minds that tell us we're not okay by focusing on what we can do rather than what we can't do. It's really worthwhile work to turn around that low self-confidence. Really worthwhile. It just might take ongoingly a long time. So if we focus on what we can do, but also what we have done, what we've achieved rather than what we can't do and what we haven't done yet, yeah, that will make a difference. The other point is that we can't meet the needs of the world on our own. If we want to relieve the suffering of all beings, then we need to join with others by combining and complementing our individual contributions. Oh, Chakijata, there's 2 of you at the moment. That's nice. It's much more fun and sometimes harder work doing it with others, yeah, but it's also very rewarding. But it's a great way to get to know folk in the Sangha, rubbing alongside each other as we're getting on with, say, running an event together at the Buddhist Centre, Women's Day or a Men's Day, or cleaning the Sangha, cleaning the Buddhist Centre together is much more enjoyable than one person doing it. And you'll know that a well-known symbol for this combined effort and aspiration is the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, the 1,000-armed, 11-headed Bodhisattva. who holds a different implement or tool in each hand. So it might be a pen, it might be a knife, it might be some knitting needles, it might be a book, it might be an iPad. Yeah, but whatever those tools are in each hand, it means that Avalokiteshvara can respond to all the needs in the world in all directions without getting worn out. And of course, Avalokiteshvara is the symbol of the Triratna Buddhist order, which I personally, as a member of the order, I really love that symbol. I sometimes have a sense of we've all got our arms out like this. But if you're really tired and you've done your bit for the week, you can put your arms down and then someone else's will come up. Yeah. So these days there are more order members than arms. So it's something like, I don't know, are we 3,000 now, Diane Andy? Anyway, about between 2,000 and 3,000. So it's the 2,000 or 3,000 armed Avalokiteshvara now. Yeah. So here we go. Look, this is our question for the next discussion group. So the question, and it'll come in the chat box. So in what ways do you contribute in the Sangha? And the challenge, the encouragement or the invitation is to be really generous with yourself. All the things that you bring and offer and contribute that help to share the Dharma and make it available for people. So what do you contribute to the Sangha? And what one more little thing could you possibly contribute to the Sangha? And what or who could help you to do this? Okay, so what do you do? What could you do? And what or who could help you to do this? So we're going to have 15 minutes and then come back. And our intention this evening is to have finished by about 22 so that we get an earlier night. Okay, see you in the discussion groups. And to hear from 2 or 3 people from your group about the sorts of things that you were talking about. So what is it that you do in the Sangha? And secondly, is there anything that you'd like to do and contribute, and who and what could help you to do that? Jyoti. Can't hear you, dear. Unmute. No, you've muted. That's it.
I think I'm hearable. We found out that actually being active on Facebook and social media can bring people in. So we had examples of people mentioning stuff on Facebook and people joining because of that. That was quite unexpected. Usually Facebook has a fairly bad press, I think, in the movement, so that was good. Also, there was a mention of contributing in terms of just inhabiting your own practice and really living it out. And there was a lovely phrase of radiating out from it. That was quite nicely put. That's a form of contribution. And also practical help in allowing those people who do good things well, like teach, to support them in their efforts in some way.
Great. Wow. Thanks very much, Jyoti. Anyone else like to share what you talked about? I could say something from the group that I was in with Robin and Liz and Arya Drishti. So first of all, we wanted to say how beneficial not being able to meet up has been in some ways, because the fact that we're meeting on Zoom has actually meant that people who live a long way from the centre, so be that in America like Arya Drishti or Liz up near Blackpool, they've both been able to involve themselves an awful lot more in the Sangha. So they've been able to access practices and courses, retreats from different parts of the world, for example, or even get involved more in helping to run and teach and support and host here in the UK because of Zoom. Yeah. And yeah, that was that was really inspiring to hear, and we mustn't lose it, must we, when we stop, when we can all meet face to face. Let's not stop offering all those people who live a long way away the opportunity to join in more. So the sorts of things we wanted to do were one of us wanted to facilitate a discussion on racism in the order. I'm just going to take that to our order conveners. And then there was a very interesting contribution about wanting there to be a discussion about the style and the way we do things in centres that might enable greater inclusion. And asking lots of different people how they'd like the centre to be and how we run things, so that it enables all sorts of different people to join in and contribute and feel comfortable there. Yeah, that'll do. And you know, one of us has really stepped up and learned how to do the hosting techie bit and is doing that regularly now. Yeah, and didn't know how to do any of that at all before. Yeah. So there must be one other group. Anybody got anything they want to share? Diane, Andy.
Yeah, so Mary and I were a group, yeah, we talked a bit about what we were contributing, but then something I said was, in a way, I've been trying to do less, actually, so that I've sort of got a bit more time to go a bit deeper and sort of think about things more and come from a deeper place. And the lockdown has given me an opportunity to do that by cancelling lots of things. And in a way, I think that's been, I suppose that really what I'm saying in a sense is practicing the Dharma more deeply, but it's also actually doing less things, so that there's some gaps and something else can arise in the spaces. Yeah. So for me, that's been really beneficial. I think I feel as though new things will arise in the spaces.
Thank you. Okay. Well, everybody, so I just want to encourage us to flame on, yeah, to go out there and enjoy the joy, if you like, of contributing. Of beneficial activity, because it gives a lot of joy to ourselves and to others. Yeah. And next week we'll be looking at the fourth Samgravasthus, Samanarthata, or exemplification, which I think is all about how we bring the best out of each other. Yeah. So thanks very much. Lovely to see you, and thank you very much for your techie help, Sundeep. And yeah, we'll see you all next week.